There are two things I really hate about politics. The first is the bending and the twisting of the truth, evading the question, which as a barrister is really frustrating because I like a straight answer to a very straightforward question, and the inconsistencies between answers or giving an answer to a different question that wasn't asked, added to the fact that you cannot legally hold MPs accountable for what they said when they were campaigning to get into government. And there's a great video on that by my learned friend Alan Robert Shaw. I'll find it and I'll link it in the description below. But it's this general bending and twisting of the truth is the first thing that really frustrates me. And it's that element of trust, trusting what somebody says and trusting them to answer the question. The second is that we are all accountable to government and the rules that they make, regardless whether we agree with them or not, regardless of whether you think that you voted for what they are doing, because you may have thought one thing when they are campaigning and they do something else. And again, they're not held accountable to it. And those are the two things that have kept me out of politics. But lots of you have asked me to talk about this, so if you want a brutally honest, frank appraisal of what I see going on in the news, please do consider subscribing to my channel. About 60% of the millions of you that watch every month don't do so. I'd like to think that I offer some insight as a barrister and as a citizen myself, living under the same rules, and how I work within those rules. So please do subscribe and I'll offer you my insight. For those that just want my legal videos, I will still do those, and they are obviously in the library. There's a couple of thousand videos in there, so there's something for everybody. So thank you for doing that. So what sparked this video today, and why am I talking specifically about the honesty and the consistency of all of this? Let's take a first look at this bit here, which is, this is to do with the winter fuel allowance. There's 2 or 3 bits in this video, and at the end of the video, there's going to be a collection of different things which all seem contradictory, and I'll leave you to make your own mind up about that. And for the avoidance of doubt, I am not in any way saying that anyone is being fraudulent in this video. These are just observations for legal reasons, you understand. Take a listen to this bit first. This is about the winter fuel allowance and what Keir Starmer said in May 2024 about what was said last year. Listen to this.
Last year, the Prime Minister was apparently drawing up plans to remove the winter fuel allowance from pensioners. His Paymaster General went a step further. He said these are the sorts of things that we need to look at. So will he now rule out taking pensioners' winter fuel payments off them?
I don't think I need to play anymore, because that's obviously crystal clear, because that's precisely what they're doing now. So I don't want to come across, and I don't want anyone to judge me as being against one government and for another. I'm just calling out what I see. This is a fundamentally different position to what's happening now. And I'm sure if I ask the question, because he's answered the question this way, he will blame previous government and some black hole that they claim to have found, which I'll come back to in a moment. But it's this inconsistency is the first thing that I don't like. And the second thing that follows is, if they decide to take it away, it's gone. And so the pensioners that did depend on that, or would have depended on that, obviously cannot now do so. But then again, with my first reason is this sort of bending and twisting of the truth and dodging and evading the question. Whilst he does answer the question, but not so directly, when asked about the winter fuel allowance and what would he say to people that are having this removed, this is what he said.
What about the people who have worked all of their lives, paid into the state, pensioners? How can you justify taking away up to £300 from those formerly working people?
So just to clarify the question, I know she said it very clearly, but I want to emphasize the perfect clarity of that question. How can you justify taking that away? Bearing in mind everything else that's going on, how can you justify taking that away? And this is the answer.
Well, it's tough. And I think the first thing to say is, and to explain, is why we had to do it. We inherited a really damaged economy. We did an audit and we discovered an undisclosed £22 billion black hole this year, which we have to fix.
That black hole includes public sector pay rises.
Well, the last government set up the pay review bodies for...
And so this goes on to essentially, for one, blame the previous government, which I'm not saying is wrong necessarily, and also the £22 billion black hole that they found, which again is not entirely straightforward, but I'll come back to that in a second. But it doesn't directly answer the question, is what would you say to those people? Now, the answer to that, according to Keir Starmer here, is to explain that it's the previous government's fault, they had a bad economy, etc. But that then begs the question, if this economy is so bad, then surely there's lots of other areas to cut back on spending, and those that are most vulnerable, according to Keir Starmer himself and previous reports that have said lots of people are at risk of dying of cold if they don't get this fuel allowance and they can't heat their houses properly, then lots of those are at risk, and yet it's being taken away anyway. And even when we look at the claim about this £22 billion black hole, Fact Check and the BBC and other sources have all said, well, it's not entirely true. It says that some bits of it, such as the BBC reported that there was an unfunded £6.4 billion cost of supporting the asylum system was unfunded. For example, much of the other stuff they would have already been aware of. So both Fact Check, the BBC and other sources all say that not all of this was entirely unexpected. So that's not entirely clear either. So blame the previous government, blame the black hole. I'm not saying the previous government was perfect, and I'm not saying the economy isn't in a terrible state. I'm not an economist, but I don't need to be an economist to know that the economy is in a bit of a state. But to answer it in that way, not directly answer the question by giving this roundabout explanation, is a little bit frustrating. Secondly, the second thing to bring up for this video that sparked this video today is this bit here, which again is bending and twisting of the truth. This is Keir Starmer's own X account, Twitter, if you absolutely insist. He says here in 2 tweets, in reverse order, we can build a future where AI drives growth, creates wealth, etc. Speaking of create wealth, if you want to create wealth with me, join my Daniel Shensmith channel, linked in the description below. It's growing nicely and I'll help you to make money on that channel. Head over there and I'll see you there as well. But he says here, new. Now, emphasis, being the lawyer about this, I do pick up on every word. He says new. So this is apparently new information. Emphasis on the new there. You see, I'm being sarcastic here to be funny, because he's being sarcastic in government. I don't really like that across the bench, but that's by the by. He says here, new. We've secured investment to create one of the largest AI data centers in Europe, based on the northeast of England, delivering jobs and wealth creation. My number one mission is to grow the economy with my government. Britain is back. Great. Grow the economy? Great. Secure these deals? Great. Secure investments? Great. But it comes to something when you can see this here is because I'm a community notes author for X, which are all anonymized, by the way. No one knows who anybody is, but it does give you access to rate proposed community notes. And one of those takes you to this article here that says, actually, no, this isn't new. This was announced a while ago. And this says, quite tongue-in-cheek, Starmer announces deal signed under Rishi Sunak. And it says here, Starmer's meeting with businesses this morning in New York to convince them to invest in the UK, to prove he's already making successful investment in the government, has announced that he's secured a £10 billion deal for the US investment company Blackstone to build the biggest AI data center. But this deal was signed off and publicized months before the election on the 15th of April, and was fully confirmed a few weeks later. And that's these 2 articles here. This one's dated the 15th of April. This is when it was all sort of signed off, and it's the same deal, as I understand it. And it was finalized a few weeks later in May. And so this isn't new at all. Now, to say new, we have secured this investment, from what I've read, for legal reasons, from what I've read, that's not entirely true. So it's this sort of bending and the twisting of the truth. And it does throw into question your trust in the people that are making the decisions, are making these statements, running the government, and not least of which the contradictions previously, many of which I'll come back to at the end of the video. But it does throw into play this whole trust thing. Now, I'll bring you a little closer for a minute, because I've got a story of trust myself here. So I received a phone call yesterday, and this is an entirely separate matter, but I received a phone call yesterday and to my personal phone number. Very few people have my personal phone number. Even when I ring clients, with all respect to clients that I've spoken to, I withhold my number so they don't get my personal phone number. I use my personal phone number for personal things. But if I ring people with my personal number, they don't have my number, except very, very, very few. And likewise, most companies don't have my phone number. So most people don't have my phone number. I think that's clear by now. But I received a phone call from a company. I had no idea who they were. I had no idea nor interest in what they were trying to sell me. And I straight away, very politely said, "Where did you get my phone number?" And they said, "We subscribe to a service which gives us access to decision makers, names and numbers and all personal details to get hold of you." He was quite frank and open about that. Of course, the way I asked him the question very directly, it inspired a direct answer from him, which I'm grateful for. He gave me a direct answer. But that then tells me that there's a company selling my data. Now, this really irritates me because this is an ongoing thing with me. There are new companies popping up all the time, marketing and quite literally selling access to my data. So I've since written to that company and I've threatened to sue them. I've said, first of all, where did you get it? How did you get it? How long have you got it? What did you plan to do with it? Why have you collected it? And essentially, they're in breach of GDPR because this is a personal phone number. There's no legitimate interest. There's no contract interest. There's no other reason they should have it. So they should remove it. They replied very quickly to say they've removed it or going to remove it, but nothing else. But they are in breach. And so whilst I could just drop it, they are in breach and it does give rise to damages. But the point here is all of your data is being sold on, quite literally sold on. And that really infuriates me, which is why I work with a company called Incogni, which goes to these data brokers and marketers who collect all of this information about you. They collect your name, your date of birth, your address, your phone number, your emails, your interests, what you surf for online, all of this sort of stuff. They put you together like a jigsaw puzzle and they sell you as they sold me the day before yesterday. And Incogni will demand on your behalf that your data is removed from their servers. There are hundreds of these brokers and they will do all of that for you. Now, I've got a long list on the dashboard that I get with Incogni that tells me the companies they've approached that have confirmed that they've removed my data. New ones as they pop up, because this is an ongoing thing. There are always more going on. You get a huge 60% discount if you use my code in the description below and the links there as well. And they will go to these data brokers and they will tell them under both the UK and US law to remove your data from their servers. That prevents it from being sold on any further and it stops this kind of spam. And more importantly, it will stop it ending up, or hopefully stop it ending up on the dark web where more nefarious actors take your data, as we've had clients come to the firm and had loans and other things taken out in their name. And it will hopefully prevent that from happening because that is a far worse situation than an annoying phone call. So check out Incogni in the description below with my link and code. And now let's take a look at this hugely contradictory and somewhat entertaining, or it would be entertaining if it wasn't so infuriating, video of different contradictions that Keir Starmer has made. Take a listen to this.
Really, it was so important to her. However ill she was, as a matter of absolute principle, she felt that you shouldn't make money from mental health. And it is a matter of principle. It's an absolute matter of principle.
So that obviously talking about healthcare and private healthcare and things like that. And that original video was in 2020. So that was about paying privately for healthcare and things like that. Now listen to the next bit, which is obviously later.
Our research shows that that's been underused and we could do more of it. And that would clear, 230,000 people off the waiting list
so more use of the private sector in the NHS under Labour.
Yes, but
a direct contradiction. So you can see the contradictions here. Let's play another one.
Private sector in the NHS under Labour.
Yes, but not a manifesto.
Well, what about university tuition fees then? Will you remain committed to scrapping them in
They're
your first
all
term?
pledges, Andrew. So the answer to these questions is yes.
But it won't be the abandoning of tuition fees, will it?
Well, we are likely to move on from that commitment.
So again, whilst he says it's a pledge, we're going to do this, promise to do a certain thing to hopefully garner votes to get into government, and then later on, just backtrack on it. Actually, we're going to move on from that, not doing that anymore. And for reasons I'll leave to the video from Alan Roberts' show, I'll link in the description below. They can't be held accountable to these things, only at the next vote. But again, let's listen on.
We're campaigning to ensure conversion therapy is banned once and for all. And we're committed to updating the GRA to introduce self-declaration for trans people.
So updating the Gender Recognition Act for self-identification for trans people, and then this one.
Second part of your question was, I'm sorry, I've just... yeah, look, I mean, I think that if we reflect on what's happened in Scotland, the lesson I take from that is that if you're going to make reforms, you have to carry the public with you. And I think that's a very important message. And I think that's why it's clear that in Scotland there should be a reset of the situation.
So they're saying, look at what's happened in Scotland. Actually, we need to rethink that, which is not necessarily a bad thing, because if you see what's happening and you react to that, that's fine. But then the statement of using that statement to say we have to be in line with the public, if you take that and apply it to the current situation, I think the vast, certainly my impression, correct me if I'm wrong in the comments, but my overall impression is that the general public are against lots of these things that are going on at the moment. My general impression is that lots of the public are against the removal of the winter fuel allowance, which is somewhat illustrated by the Labour conference voting to backtrack on that removal. My general impression, again, is that the general public are against everyone that was campaigning receiving gifts and donations, which, albeit declared, look like they are a wrong influence. I'm not saying they are for legal reasons, but it looks bad. I think a lot of people think it looks bad. That's the reason they have to be declared in the first place. Now, regardless, I mean, barristers don't have a register of declarations of interest with our representative body, the Bar Council. We don't say, I have someone that's, donating this much to me, therefore I'm not compromised on this case. It doesn't work like that. What we do is if we work with a company or, we're in-house counsel with a company, we inform the records department and we tell them that we work in that company. But if we receive a gift or a donation or whatever, we have to absolutely be sure that it is not or is not seen to be affecting our independence, which I've mentioned in previous videos. Now, there is one case, I'm not going to name any names to avoid embarrassment, but there was one case where a barrister was found to have been giving cash to a former client who he felt sorry for because she was going to be in a very difficult situation. And so after the case had finished, gave her some money because he felt like he wanted to help her out. And as I recall, he was suspended from practice for 6 months for doing that, because it looks like it would both bring the profession into disrepute and it would compromise his integrity and independence. So that is the level of independence that we need to maintain, which is why any of us barristers would be extremely careful to accept any gift or donation. Most of us would just outright refuse it. Now, many barristers might receive the odd gift here or there, a bottle of wine or a bottle of something, and that's not really here or there. But if it was a large gift, or certainly a monetary gift over and above the fees, that might look questionable. And so barristers wouldn't do it. And so therefore, I think it looks bad for politicians to do it when they're campaigning to get into government, especially when it's written up in sort of a vague or broad way that could be interpreted another way. So office support, which is really clothing. Now, had they just said it was clothing, that might be a different matter. And so these really are the things that I take issue with. Either not answering the question directly, answering the question with something that was completely different, or going back on promises, or just pretending that that wasn't important, or exaggerating things, all of these kind of things. I know that it's an art of persuasion and all of this sort of stuff, but it's just something I don't like. I like direct, straight answers to questions. And if there is a reason, so for example, the Gender Recognition Act, there was a good reason to say, well, we've seen what happened in Scotland, we need to backtrack on that. That's fine. I mean, that was a direct answer. So that at least was clear. So I don't want anyone to think that I'm bashing any one government or another, but I am going to call out precisely what I see and what I think of it. And humbly, lots of you have said that you like to hear my views on that. So for that, I would ask you, please do subscribe to come back for more, and I'll see you all next time.